on the morning of April 28, 2025, starting from the west of Spain, extending to the south of Portugal and France. The expected event occurred in a wide area. The electricity suddenly went out. Millions of people were plunged into darkness without any warning. Infrastructure systems stopped, trains became inoperable, signaling systems collapsed. Subtitles: MCK panic-filled posts were also shared through the media. So was this a kind of warfare method, or was it a cyber attack? Why and how did such a large-scale outage happen? The first suspicion was that a high-frequency atmospheric event might have affected the European energy grid. To put it technically, in such cases on the electricity transmission lines, a situation called loss of synchronization occurs. Different regions in the grid have to operate at the same frequency at the same time. However, a sudden imbalance can cause this system to collapse in a chain reaction. Portugal blamed Spain for what happened, and Spain pointed to France. So apparently, none of them have clear information about the cause. Spanish energy officials said the incident might be due to a very rare atmospheric fluctuation. Some engineers associated this situation with abnormal changes in the ionosphere layer triggered by solar activity. In other words, they said the incident might have a geomagnetic origin. Some experts also say this incident is a warning. The sun may produce larger geomagnetic storms in the coming period. Previously, on the cover of The Economist 2025 magazine, which I made a video about, we saw an image of a dark city immediately to the right of the visual, showing a solar flare. It was emphasizing that a serious power outage could occur. So, was the reason for all of this a solar flare? When space weather records were examined, a moderate G2 class solar storm was detected shortly before the event. But it was expected that this should have affected Europe much less. Maybe there are still things they don't know about the sun. Such storms may occur more frequently in the coming years because the sun is now approaching the most active period of its 11-year cycle. This power outage in Spain may be just a small rehearsal preparing us for a much bigger danger. Maybe nature is slowly warning us. So, what would happen in the world after a massive solar flare? Do you think a solar flare is something like this? The flares or explosions on the sun? What do these mean and why are they so important for us? I'll explain everything in a moment. Of course, the video at the beginning is exaggerated to show what a solar flare would look like, because it's impossible for you to see an explosion like this. In fact, it's impossible for us to see a normal solar flare from Earth with our own eyes. You need some equipment for this. When we look at the sun from Earth, it seems very calm, like it will never change, doesn't it? But the reality is very different. These were some of the activities happening on the sun. The nuclear fusion reactions that power the sun's core at 15 million degrees Celsius generate electromagnetic energies. And on the sun's surface, the combination of heat and light creates interesting images. One of the interesting images is these oval lines on the sun. The gases on the sun are constantly in motion, and this circulates, stretches, and bends the magnetic fields. Eventually, these oval lines that we see appear. Another thing that is wondered about is these small dark spots on the sun. These are called sunspots in order to describe the dark spots on the surface of the sun. They look dark because they are cooler compared to other regions of the sun. So because the surrounding area is very bright, these parts look black to us. Still, the spots are very hot, about 3,600 degrees Celsius. This is similar to the color change in the embers that appears when we light a fire. Now, the black areas on a piece of wood that is turned into embers are cooler than the yellow parts. But if you try to touch the black part, you'll get badly burned because it's still very hot. Now let's get to the really terrifying part, a solar flare. A solar flare is essentially a magnetic event related to sunspots. In short, it's the release of intense energy just above the surface of the sun. But don't be fooled by how simply I explained it. If we were to release about 10% of the energy in the sun, it would be roughly 1,000,000 times the energy of all the nuclear weapons on Earth. You can imagine the rest. These explosions usually move at very high speeds and emit a large amount of radiation into space. Let me show you a video. Recorded on April 16th, 2012. It looks incredible, doesn't it? We can clearly see the scattering of particles after the solar flare, and most of them are falling back onto the surface of the sun. If this flare in 2012 hadn't happened 9 days earlier, it could have caused serious damage to the Earth. For example, the solar flare in this part might seem small to you. Indeed, it looks very small compared to the massive size of the sun. But next to a tiny solar flare, the American continent looks this small. Take a look at what we're dealing with. This is an image taken by the Solar Orbiter satellite from the sun towards the Earth. And this shows the position and size of the Earth, which remains in darkness in the satellite image. The intensity of these eruptions on the sun, just like earthquakes, cannot be predicted yet. However, it has been determined during which time periods they will be more intense. This is called the sunspot cycle. Sunspots continue in a cycle approximately every 11 years, like storms that constantly repeat themselves. Numerous sunspots indicate a solar maximum with intense eruptions. Few sunspots signify a solar minimum. The period when eruptions on the sun are most frequently observed is called the solar maximum, which is when these spots are seen the most. In a moment, we'll see if we're in danger for the future. But first, I'm going to take you back a long time ago, to one of the days when humanity experienced this solar eruption most intensely, the year 1859. That day, known as the Carrington event, occurred during solar cycle 10. Solar cycles are progressions that started in 1749 and increase every 11 years. Amateur astronomers named Richard Carrington and Richard Hudson observed incredible sunspots on the sun from August 28, 1859 to September 2nd. And on September 1st, the process had already begun. Massive magnetic energy cycles spread over the sunspots. A magnetic bomb twisting and getting ready to release energy is about to explode. The atoms spread toward the expanding balloon solar system, made up of subatomic particles and energy, and reached Earth in about 18 hours at a rapid pace. In this image, you first see a low-level solar flare. This flare occurred in 1859. It looks pretty scary. And these are the pieces of paper called magnetograms, which have been kept since that day, recording the measurements of the Earth's magnetic field. Especially on September 1st, the lines almost went off the charts. After the solar flare in 1859, the telegraph systems of all Europe and North America collapsed. Telegraph poles were emitting electric sparks. The effects of the radiation on humans are still unknown. For the people living in 1859 that day, the effect was only short-term communication problems. But that was all. Oh, and the mesmerizing auroras formed in the atmosphere had offered people a visual feast. Nothing else happened because people weren't dependent on electricity. The sunspots observed a month later would be drawn like this by Christopher Carrington. People of that time may have avoided major problems because they didn't have technology, maybe even from dying. But after that date, nothing was the same and would never be the same again. In 1965, during a period when electricity was spreading all over the world, a solar flare caused a 13-hour power outage in America, resulting in an economic loss of about $100 million. Although it wasn't related to a solar flare, In 1977, a power outage caused by a lightning strike occurred in New York. The outage lasted for exactly 25 hours. After the outage, 4,500 people were detained for looting. 5,000 police officers were injured and thousands of women were harassed. 9 months after the power outage, the number of births peaked. Maybe you've seen the movie called The Purge. In the film, all crimes were allowed for one day. It's as if the purge happened in 1977. Today, according to data, just 1 hour of outage in the United States costs $458 million. For a single day, it's $11 billion. For Turkey, this daily loss is only $161 million. If we do this for the whole world, it would mean an economic loss of $29 billion for a single day. If there is an outage, the United States would be by far the country that suffers the most damage. So, could a terrible solar flare happen anytime soon? The good thing is that the Earth has an invisible magnetic shield. The bad thing is that this magnetic shield now has some weaknesses. So, a weak spot has started to form in the Earth's protective shield. As a result, if the magnetically charged gases that will emerge after a strong solar flare pass through these weak spots, that's when terrible things can happen. A powerful explosion would first destroy the satellites around the Earth. Then it would probably pose serious dangers for the astronauts in orbit. And when these harmful rays reach the Earth, they would cause long-term power outages and problems that could lead to countless loss of life. But let me tell you something that will put you both at ease. There probably won't be a very serious explosion in the coming years, because right now it's the 25th. We're in the solar cycle, and this is one of the periods when sunspots are seen the least. In fact, these sunspots will gradually decrease until 2030. Look at this. In the middle of every century, sunspots increase, which means the likelihood of solar flares happening goes up. The Carrington event also happened in the middle of the 19th century. In 1859, but to tell the truth, the 21st. A severe solar flare is not anticipated until the mid-21st century at the earliest, so there's no need to worry. But I should also mention this. In the last days of the Earth, this weakening magnetic field may be powerless against severe flares that could come from the sun. And if a Carrington event happens again in this era, it would mark the beginning of a dark age for humanity.
Our phones, even for growing food and pumping water. But after the outage, everything broke down. Car batteries, jet turbines, even batteries, they all shut down forever. There was a shortage of food, medicine for illnesses, and fire trucks to put out fires. Governments fell, militias rose up. The smart ones left the city. The ones who stayed died in droves.